Hello, good morning from the Ellison Hotel, and today with Caledonian Travel. That's the driver. Well, I did see him a few seconds ago, but he disappeared. So we're on our way to Galway today. I think we're actually paid to go around the city tour with a guide, which I might film later on there.
Doorway and window. Now the Browns and they were one of the 14 Norman families who established Galway City. And the names of the 14 Norman families who established Galway City, each one is on a flagpole here just on your right. So if you want to know their names, well, they're all there, and their coat of arms is also there. They originally came from Norway and France, and this is where they established Galway City. And the Brown doorway was in the Brown mansion, which was in the middle of the city, which has long since been demolished. And when the Lynch, who were a very important Norman family as well, married a Brown, when their mansion was being demolished, the Galway Archaeological and Historical Society decided to remove that doorway and window from it and put it there. So we all could see the type of houses those rich Norman families lived in many centuries ago. That particular doorway and window dates from 1627. And the Lynch coat of arms and the Brown coat of arms was over the doorway, because it was the custom among the rich Norman families that when they're married, they usually like to record the event in stone, unlike now. And of course, as you walk through Galway City later on, if you look up over many of the doorways, you'll see coat of arms there. They were where the original Norman mansions were, but they're long since demolished and gone. And just there, a little further back behind the Brown doorway, now if you have good eyesight, you can see a statue of a little man over there, about my size. He was called Padraig O'Conor, a great writer in the Irish language. His name in English was Conroy. So once upon a time he was in England. He was applying for a job in the civil service, and he wrote his application in English, and he asked them could he submit his application in Irish, and they said yes, he could. So he submitted his application in Irish. They had no one to correct it, so they asked him did he know of anyone who could correct it, and he said yes, he did. So he had the unique distinction of submitting his application in the Irish language and having it corrected by himself, so naturally enough he got the job. So there we are. He was known, I suppose, as what would be described now as a cute Irishman. So there you are. And of course, just there as well, we have a reproduction in Brown sails of the old type fishing boats that used to be on Galway Bay. They were called the Galway hookers. Now there are other kind of hookers in this city, but this is the fishing boat with the brown sails on it here that we're talking about. And there was a very well-known hooker here one time of the other class, and she went round the city, and any time ever I met her, she always said, well, Tim, I wish I had a second pair of legs and I could make twice as much money. So she was a very well-known figure. And just down there as well, further on, we'll pass by it later on, is the oldest hotel here in Galway. It's now called the Hardyman Hotel, changed its name many, many times. And by the way, if you feel short taken when we come back and you want to have a little leak or a loo, well, any of the bars, restaurants, cafes or the hotels, they cannot refuse you admittance. You might see a notice up on the door, these are for patrons only. Now there is a public one down there at the other end of the square. It costs, I think, about 50 pence to get in, and if you haven't finished your business in a certain number of minutes, well, the shower comes on and the door opens. So you could find yourself on, you never know, on Facebook or some of those things by the time you come back. We also have Boots chemist here, in case you're feeling not too well. We have those, and we have Marks and Spencer's. So feel free to spend all your money. Now we go right here at the top of this hill. And this is a very well-known bar here. If you were here on a Thursday night, there's Irish music there, goes on all night, and also a lot of ballad singing of one kind or another. So we go down along here, and as we come to the end of this, before we just turn right, you'll see a statue we'll be going right here. You see a statue of a lady in through the bushes. She was originally in the Magdalen Laundry that you might have heard tell of. They were ferocious places. And there is a poem there written by a lady who was also in the Magdalen Laundry. So that's it just there. The Magdalen Laundry itself was just here on our right where this building is now. And it was a home for unmarried mothers. By the way, they got ferocious treatment inside there. And glad to say now, all these things are all finished. And this is where the tourist office was, Andy, when you were here once upon a time, now long closed. This is St. Patrick's Church, the new one built beside it there. They closed down the old one and built a new one. That's what you can do if you have the money. That bar there called Rabbits, that was set up by a man who was in the 1849 gold rush in California. So it's still called the Gold Bar. We go on here, and this is the hotel I was talking about, just here on the left. Galway's best known hotel, also our most prestigious hotel and most expensive hotel. Anybody who was royalty or famous of any description, that's where they spent their time. Visited by, in 1903 by the King when he came here. Also visited by Prince Charles and Camilla when they came here a few years ago. So if you go in there, you can say to yourself, well, went to the loo there in the most expensive hotel in Galway City. So it's a proud boast sometimes. And another hotel coming up here named after Queen Victoria, the Victoria Hotel here on the left. And this is one of the very old buildings here in Galway, this Methodist Church. We're inundated with churches of all descriptions here in Galway. So there's the Victoria. Now we're approaching Galway Docks, that's a new building since you were here last Sunday. This one here with all the glass on it. And we have, it's the usual story, apartments, shops, cafes, restaurants. And there's also a business factory inside there. So it's all kinds of business goes on in that building. We'll go straight on here, and on our left we have Galway Docks. This is where the famine ships left in the ancient days, 1845 to 1849, when the famine was here at its height. And coming up here on our right at the end of this road, there's a bar which was Conroy's one time, called it to Conroy, the man whose statue is in the square. He was very fond of the drink. They had 3 bars, so he ran the whole lot into bankruptcy and they all had to be sold. So that put an end to him. He wrote a lot of Irish books and all that, but he was in many ways a bit of a gangster. So these are all new apartment blocks here on our left, that you can see. And we have a new cinema here as well on our right. Now we'll be on this inside here, we'll be going right now. That's part of the old Norman wall. And coming up here on our left, past the sign there that says museum, we have the best example of the original old wall that was round Galway City. So we can just see it there. So there it is. Want a good walk round it later on, that's fine. And coming up here on our right, we have another very old building called Blake's. That was Blake's mansion, Blake's house. And we're stopping here for maybe a few minutes since there's no bus here, and we might tell you a little bit more. Now, as you walk around Galway City, most people, when they come to Galway, they all walk that street there, that's called Quay Street. When we pass by there, and the tourist season is usually filled with people, I call it the tourist barometer. Now, at the other end of it, there is another very well-known bar called the King's Head, appropriately named because it was given as a gift by King Charles to an executioner called Gunning for chopping the head off King Charles of England when he could find nobody else to do it. Cromwell offered the job to a lot of people, but back then the belief was that if you interfered with royalty, you interfered with God. And when you died, well, not alone did you go to hell, but you went at least 100 miles below it. So nobody would execute the king, and this fella said, I'll go and I'll do it. So he was reported to have gone round Galway for years afterwards, flexing his arm when he'd go in for the bar and saying, these muscles chopped the head of the English king. Well, when the king came back after Cromwell, this man had to flee. because there was searches out for him to try and bring him to justice for chopping off the king's head. So he was a hero one minute and he was a ruffian the next, as indeed very often happens. So that old building there that you see now, that was a jail one time. And in the Irish castles, you see up near the top, there is a kind of a projection and an empty space. A door was usually underneath, the door is still there. And if there was any visitors whom the people didn't like, well, they might throw either cold water or boiling water, depending upon how much they disliked them, down on top of them and pretend they hadn't seen them. So there we are. That was known as the mortar hole. If the castle was being attacked, well, the people inside would always have a supply of stones, and at the door, whoever